I know we've only known each other for 4 weeks and 3 days, but to me, it seems like 9 weeks and 5 days.
All right, all right, all right. Welcome, all you passionate plant people and garden enthusiasts to the Let's Get Growing show here on the Urban Gardener channel. I'm Enoch. I'm your host today. We've got a great show for you today here on our Sunday edition of the show. It is our monthly book club. It is monthly book club time here on the show. And on our monthly book club this month, we have our good friend Scott Wilson's Gardener Scott's Guide to Raised Bed Gardening. This is our book feature this month. And we've got Gardener Scott with us today, along with our good friend Mark Boucher Colbert joining with us for In the Garden here in just a few minutes as well, too. It's always great to have our good friend Mark Boucher Colbert with us live here with us to talk in the garden and to do our monthly gardening book club here for our Sunday edition of the show. So we look forward to that here coming up. So stay tuned for our great guests and great conversation today. And if you can, right here at the top of the show, click the like button, hit the thumbs up there, as well as subscribe and hit the bell notification and be notified of all of our upcoming videos and live streams here on the Urban Gardener channel. And share with all your friends and let them know about our great shows here on the Let's Get Growing show each and every Saturday and Sunday at 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, 2 p.m. Eastern, again, right here on the Urban Gardener channel. And a big, huge shout out to all of you who are joining with us on the replay right now. Thank you so much for tuning in to our Sunday edition of the show on your time. It's always appreciated having you here with us. Definitely drop down into the comments. Let me know you are here. Let me know if you got any suggestions. Let me know if there's any book suggestions you might have or any guests you might like to see on the show, or just drop in and say hi. I love to hear from all of you. So definitely get into the comments. If you are here with us live, you definitely want to drop into the chat too. If you haven't been in the chat before, definitely let us know you're here. Let us know where you're growing from. And if you got any small channels or anything like that, definitely announce that in the chat as well too. And we'll see if we can't drop a link in and give you a shout out in our chat as well. So definitely do that. And oh yeah, if you have any questions too for our guests coming up here as well, put those in all big capital letters if you can, just so I can see the questions from the regular conversation. Just kind of helps me out to make sure that I'm answering all of your questions. We like to make sure we get them all fitted into our conversation if we can. And definitely follow all of the links down below to our guests and to also a copy of this great book that we're talking about today, Gardener Scott's Guide to Raised Bed Gardening. So definitely follow all the links down below to all of that great stuff that we've got down there too. So lots and lots of great things going on here on the Let's Get Growing show today. And also, as we've been talking about now for the last few weeks, or not few weeks, last few shows, last week being the first week of April, we are celebrating National Garden Month. Yeah, it's a National Garden Month. And so we're kind of in celebration of, National Garden Month, which is, see, I got a banner for this here. National Garden Month is a month-long celebration dedicated to gardening and horticulture, encouraging people to engage with nature and the benefits of growing plants. And what a great thing. And as I've been saying, like I said, over the last few shows, is that, we're all gardeners here on this show. We're all celebrating gardening and gardening every month. so it's gardening every month for us. So I think it's a really great idea for us gardeners who are already experienced gardeners, or are growing gardens already, basically, to help encourage others to come into the gardening, celebrate gardening with the rest of us, come into the pastime, if you will, of gardening. And I thought, it'd be a great idea, is what we could do is we could find friends or family or neighbors or people, that are, close enough to us and our lives as well, too, that we can invite them over to our gardens, that maybe we can invite some people over and kind of show them our garden spaces and kind of encourage them in a way, kind of like show them, this can be really easy and it's not really hard and it's easy to set up. And we could take that encouragement maybe a little bit further and volunteer to maybe help them set up and start their own gardens. Maybe even like I was saying on yesterday's show, is I was thinking after I talked about this last week, was that an even better idea for me too, is I've lived in my neighborhood for many, many years. A lot of neighbors know me, but there's always new ones moving in and coming out of the neighborhood. So I've got some varieties of tomatoes that I grow each and every year that I save seeds from. I've got some other varieties of some things that I save seeds from. So I thought maybe I'll make a little personal seed packets or something like that and take them over to some of my neighbors that I've got, some of the newer neighbors, introduce myself and let them know, that they're always welcome to come over and check out my garden spaces. I do have a more publicly open spaces in some sense too, so I can welcome people just a little bit differently than others, really can. If you got like a yard space, you don't want just people coming and showing up. But I got alleyways, people come anyways and see all the spaces anyway. So I'm inviting people over. I'm giving out some seed packets to some neighbors, reintroducing myself to the neighborhood in a sense, and letting people know that they're welcome to check out my garden spaces, so that so that we can encourage people to maybe begin and start their own gardens, and let them know that they have a garden ally in a sense in their neighborhood who can help them along if they need with any of the sort of issues they might have with their garden and that sort of thing. And really, I just think that's a really great idea. It's a good way for us gardeners who are already celebrating gardening month every month already to celebrate this gardening month this year, this April here in 2025, by getting out there and encouraging some others to get out and garden as well too. So right on, right on. And that was the thing I wanted to do too. I wanted to ask all of you as well too. I think it's a good idea. Ask all of you, what do you guys think? Maybe some ideas that we could do as far as celebrating and doing for gardening month, as gardeners already who celebrate gardening month every month. What are some things we could do this month, that would be really cool? If you got any ideas or suggestions, definitely drop into the chat there, let me know, or get into the comments if you're watching on the replay as well too. So again, thank you everybody for being here. It's great to have you here again for our Sunday edition of the Let's Get Growing show. It's always awesome to have you guys here with us. And right on, right on. Let's see here. Let's welcome a few people into the show right now. Here at the top of the show, we definitely want to welcome in our good friend Jay Dixon, joining us from Midwestern Ontario, Canada. Jay is our facilitator of the show, and we'll be dropping in links throughout the show. So keep an eye out for those links. Utilize those links for further information, or as I was saying before, too, checking out some other channels if we're doing any channel shout outs or anything like that as well, too. And also a big shout out as well to my good friend Adam, joining us right from up the road here in Central Point, Oregon. I'm from Southern Oregon as well too, so it's great to have Adam here. Thank you for joining with us, Adam. And I see we got David from Bowtie Life in the Garden. Triple G, greetings, global gardeners. Right on, right on. A little tribute to our guest today, Gardener Scott. Thank you, David, for being here. And I see we've got Christine Stress Reliever joining with us at Gardner Scott. So excited to be able to listen to you as a bonus this week. This is my first time listening to the Urban Gardener. Well, thank you and welcome to the show. It is great to have you here. We'll have Gardner Scott here on in just a little bit later in the show. And we'll talk about this just really wonderful book that he wrote. I can't wait to really dig into it some more with him. We've talked about it with him on the show already when he was announcing it and everything. But now that I've had a chance to read it and everything, really excited to talk with him about that and also with our good friend Mark MBC here in just a minute as well too. Mobius, thanks for being here. It's good to see you. Good to see you, Bettina, joining us from Ontario as well too. Thanks for being here. Let's see here. I see we got Kevin joining with us here, sowing some sweet psyllium as we speak. Yeah, I love it when I hear you guys jumping in the comments there and you're watching and listening while you're doing your different garden chores or sowing seeds and all that sort of stuff. Jersey girl, great to see you. Thank you for being here. It's great to have you with us today. Let's see, Jeanette there jumping in, just saying hi. Penny saying hello. Great to have you. Right on, everybody. Thanks for, like I said, thank you for being here. It's like we got a great show. We got a great book featured this week for our book club this week. So hold on here in just a little bit. We'll talk with Gardner Scott and let's see here. I want to get to this here because I want to go ahead and bring in our good friend for it for our Sunday edition in the garden. All right, everybody. Like I said, it's Sunday, so it's time for our good friend.
Book group.
Yeah. I know.
Psyched.
He's like psyched out. It's great. It's always good to have you here live on the show with us for a live edition of In the Garden as we get ready for our monthly gardening book club. It's really great to have you again here with us, Mark.
Yeah, we're mixing it up a little this week. We're doing second Sunday instead of third, but then, kind of just changing the energy a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. And, it's great that it kind of worked out that way, give you the next Sunday, because as everybody knows, next Sunday is actually Easter. It just kind of
got Easter Sunday. Some of
got
us
Easter
are observing,
Sunday.
so
Yeah.
appreciate the flexibility on that.
Yeah. So it just kind of worked out great that we have Gardner Scott on 2 weeks in a row, and we usually do the second week with him anyways, doing the Q&A and everything, so we could just switch it up, and it was just worked out really well. And like I'm telling everybody as well too, is that it's also, we also get kind of a bonus in having Gardner Scott twice this month, so we get a cool 2 Sundays in a row where we get to have a great conversation first this Sunday about his great book, and then we'll do our regular Q&A next Sunday. But that's just kind of a good bonus because he's also got to take next month off too, so we'll have him twice this month just to make up for not having him next month.
Enoch, I gotta say too, every time I hear you in the intro say, each and every Saturday and Sunday you're doing these programs. I only touch in every, once a month, and I do a little segment another month. But man, you are a beast. You are a garden beast to do this every weekend. You're providing, and I see the guests you have on. It's amazing. So I just think this is an incredible resource that you're offering. So thank you.
I appreciate the compliments for sure. I mean, it is some work. It's been as more and more as I go along with it, I was like, when I first thought of this idea, and you remember I came to you, we were working on it and everything. Yep. I just wondered, is it sustainable? And here we are, and I've been worried about that on the whole process and everything. But here we are in our third year. And like you said, we are so fortunate that we've been able to have some of the most amazing garden communicators in the world.
Yeah.
on this show. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And that's just an I really think that's an unbelievable accomplishment in itself, you know, when it comes down to it for our show. And again, you know, it's great to have you along with as well too. Like I said, you've been a part of this since the very beginning, and I've always appreciated every bit you do as well too. And enough complimenting each other. Let's get on and let's talk about what's growing on in the garden here, Mark. I hear you got some things going on. You got some things to share with us here. Let's talk about it. What's going on in the garden?
Okay, I want to talk about something that I just discovered this year. And so I've been gardening about 30 years, and it's weird to, and professionally 30 years. So it's in one capacity or another, it's weird to just discover something totally new. Like, I
Yeah.
never even heard of this, and it seems so simple, but yet it's so genius. The way I've been hearing it referred to as soil snails, or
Oh
I like
yeah.
to call it like
Yeah.
soil roll-ups or something.
Right.
Look, and I heard about this through I believe she's a British gardener. Her name is Farida Sober, Farida Sober, the first and the last name. So she's
Okay.
popularizing this. It's a method. Okay, I'm gonna explain it with a visual. So you
Okay.
take some piece of material. Here I've tried this with tin foil. Um, this one is about 8 inches
Yeah.
wide, and I usually like it about 24 inches long. This is actually about 17 or 18 inches. This is just an old scrap piece of tin foil I had around, but I've used it like this with heavy duty foil.
Mm-hmm.
I'm actually folding this in two to make this
Okay.
strip. Anyway,
Mm-hmm.
8 inches long, 24 inches, 24 inches long, 8 inches wide. My favorite material to do this with, though, is rubber pond liner. So I've got strips cut of rubber pond liner, 6 to 8 inches wide. It will be fine. So basically, you lay this flat on your table, potting table, your whatever your surface is. You
Yeah.
put a layer of potting soil on, maybe an inch thick or a half-inch thick, depending on how you could trial and error a little bit.
Yeah.
And then you roll it up just like a cinnamon roll. So you're going to roll this thing up. Of course, it's going to be much thicker than this because it has a lot of potting soil. But basically,
Yeah.
you're going to create a cylinder that looks like this, just exactly as if you were going to be doing cinnamon rolls, you'd be
Mm-hmm.
ready to slice it. But instead of slicing
Yeah.
it, you stand it upright, and you will see you'll see the filling. In other words, the soil filling, and into that you will sow your seeds. Then you can put a little more soil on top. Then you can set it in a tray or something. Because it's a continuous cylinder of soil, as long as sometimes some soil will fall out the bottom, just pack it in again, put it in a
Right.
tray. It's going to have bottom watering. You can also water it from the top.
Exactly.
The
Yeah.
seeds are going to sprout. I've been doing this really successfully with my tomatoes. And when it's time, and then you put elastic bands or something around it. You have to hold it together. When it's time to transplant, you simply put it again on a flat surface. You gently unroll it,
Mm-hmm.
and then you can pick your plants out of there. Here's the genius of this system, though. Let's say you're in a cold snap, and for me, a lot of times when I'm transplanting tomatoes, they're going from an indoor grow room to an outdoor protected space, like a little bit of a greenhouse or something like that. But let's say it's just a little too cold still. You
Mm-hmm.
can unroll it, put another layer of soil on it, or worm castings, or whatever you want, and then
Yeah.
re-roll it back up with the plants still in it.
Okay. Yeah.
And give them
Yeah.
another week or two of growing. They got more soil, they got more root space to expand into. This method is just completely genius.
Yeah.
Again, part of my quest to eliminate plastic from the garden. If you use this tin foil, I think would only last a season or two. It gets kind of beat up. But you can use whatever scrap method, whatever scrap materials you have around. The pond liner I really like because it'll go, 20, 30 years. That stuff's
Yeah.
really
Yeah. That's
amazing.
a lifetime one for sure.
Yeah. So this, and if you go to Farida Sober's Instagram account, she is showing all these amazing starts that she is growing, all kinds of stuff, eggplant, peppers. I've done onions. I'm doing leeks right now. Like I said, almost all my tomatoes. And I tried side by side with plastic pots and this method, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
seeing equal or better growth in the soil snail. So I am really excited about that. It's like, how did I not get any of this info for the last 30 years? How come this is only
Right.
coming to me right now? But it's awesome.
Yeah, yeah, it's great. And again, too, it's kind of fun, and it's kind of fun to see sometimes each and every year. And we were talking a little bit about this before the show, is kind of how some newer things, or things that maybe that are a little older or whatever, kind of rise up to the top each year and become popularized, and you start seeing it everywhere. And this is just one of those
Yeah,
this year. But then again, too, it's kind of like, yeah, when you think of the idea of it, yeah, it seems really like, why didn't we think about this a long time ago? Why didn't I just come up with it myself or something, right?
exactly. I know I guess that's a little bit of egoism there, but it's always like when you see a good idea, it's like, oh gosh, I could have thought of that. I wish I had been the one who popularized it.
Right, right. It's great.
Anyway, it's just a great technique. I really encourage people to try it out. Um, I love it. I'm loving it, and it saves a lot of space early on in the potting process. I always consider my space under my grow lights to be prime real estate, right? I don't want to
Mhm.
take up too much of that space, and there's a lot of competition for that space early on in the season. So it's good to
Yeah,
find this technique that's really amazing. And like I said, it's really flexible. You can't take plants out of pots and then try to repot them with the same density. You can't do that. So it's cool to be able to unroll this snail and then have the same amount of plants in there, but give them more soil. It's really amazing.
yeah, yeah. That is a really great idea. I'm definitely going to go out and find something and do that this afternoon for sure. I'm gonna get my
Yeah,
first
yeah,
one
give it a
started.
try.
Just to give it a try. It's just too easy, too cool for sure. Got to do it.
So, this time of the year, man, there's so much going on in the garden, but
Yeah,
we're transplanting tomatoes like crazy at my school garden. Peppers and eggplants are coming on. Lots of
yeah,
lettuces are going out. The early season here in Portland, we have a pretty early season. So I was already harvesting radishes this week from my school garden that I planted in January under cover. Gardener Scott's probably going to be drooling because he's got in his garden. There's a couple of pictures of the snow laden garden in January, but for
yeah,
us, we're working the soil often in January. And then
yeah.
at my Noble Rot garden, the rooftop garden, we have lettuces coming out. I
Oh
harvested some
yeah,
overwintered carrots,
yeah.
which were delicious. So just a lot of stuff already happening.
Yeah, yeah, it's great. It's gotta be getting nice up there too, up on that rooftop garden. Have you guys, I mean, I'm only judging because we are actually still a whole state apart, but you know what I mean? You're up in Portland, I'm down at the very southern part of the state in
Yeah,
in
yeah,
in Rogue Valley, but we've had a few nice days lately. So, it's kind of felt like almost, really felt like spring really, you know what I mean? Been able
exactly.
to
Yeah,
get
we're starting to
out,
get
been able to
those.
dig in the soil, been able to get work done, do things because it's
Yes.
nice. And I bet up on that rooftop, it's just really beautiful.
This week we're going to get it looks like a whole week of high of seven in the 70s, so
Ooh,
low
yes.
70s. So it's
Perfect.
going to be really nice.
Yeah, that's gonna be perfect. Yeah,
Yeah, looking
definitely.
forward to that.
Yeah, yeah. Anything else you got going on right now?
Well, I do have a humble failure to admit to. I did nuke a bunch of pepper starts. That was
Yeah,
humbling and humiliating. It's always like being in a hurry, thinking you know something, not. I was so there was some aphid. I was starting to see some aphid problems on my pepper starts, and they were getting real thick on the little starts as they had just emerged from the soil. Stuff I planted in February, and so I had this 3-in-1 kind of organic, soft bodied insect control, kind of like an insecticidal soap mixed with some other stuff. Um, and I was kind of thinking I knew the ratios, not looking carefully to measure it all out. And I made it a little too concentrated and it just nuked the thing. So,
oh my god.
cautionary tale, read the labels, measure, mix precisely. Lesson learned, but still humbling. Luckily, I had some other ones coming on that I had
Yeah,
planted a little later. So
yeah,
sometimes that's a good strategy. Don't plant everything at once. Plant a little bit in succession. So I still have plenty of peppers. I'm fine, but I may have to buy a few starts of stuff that I wish I had grown myself, but oh well.
Yeah. Well, we live and we learn, right? And that's
Yeah, we live
definitely
and
one
we
of the
learn.
it's one of the great things about being a gardener, though, too, is that, is that it's all built on experience and trial and error, a lot of it, when it comes down to it. And even us experienced gardeners still find ways to find error when it comes
Well,
to
a
we
lot of
still,
time
it
it's just
doesn't,
being in a rush. Like
yes.
one
Oh,
of the
I
things that
agree
I
completely.
often don't do is I'll save making a plant tag for the very end. Like I'll prioritize all the planting, the soil prep, the planting, getting the stuff in. And then it's kind of like, oh, I'm at the end of my time. I got to go run off to the next thing or do the next task. And I don't have those tags at the ready, or I haven't made a plant tag before I planted the thing. And then
Yeah.
I'll be like, oh, I'll get to that. And then I don't. And then I forget what it was that I planted. I know I should do this,
Yeah.
and yet sometimes I let it slip away. So sometimes
Yeah.
you know what you should do, but you just don't do it.
Yeah. And again, too, like you said, sometimes we're just prioritizing other things, though, too, because sometimes other things become, more important, and we got to get that done. And then
Yeah.
there slides away the time that we needed in order to do that. And and then it slides away from our memories sometimes. And and then there we go. And
Yeah, my memory's like a sieve. If I'm standing over a crop planting it and I'm telling myself, oh, I'm sure I'm going to remember what variety this is. That's like a guarantee that I won't remember it. Absolute guarantee that I'm going to forget it in like 5. It's almost like hearing somebody's name and you forget it 5 minutes later.
yeah.
It's almost like, what peas did I just plant? What carrots are those? Or, it's just going to fly out of my mind.
Yeah. Well, there should almost be like like a gardening group or something like that called the Forgotten Garden, where gardeners just share pictures of the things that they've messed up and forgotten about or
Yes.
something, and we could all just share our failures and errors and all that sort of stuff.
That would be very comforting.
Yeah, it would be, wouldn't it? Right on, Mark. Let's get moving on today. We got a really great book to talk about here. So we got Gardner Scott's Guide to Raising Their Bed.
Got some raised
Gardening.
bed gardening to talk about.
So let's take a break real quick here, and we'll be right back to get started with this month's Gardening Book Club.
See you in a minute.
Hey gardeners, thanks for tuning in to our show today. We'll be right back at it here in just a moment. I just wanted to take a second here to highlight our regular videos and features here on the Urban Gardener channel. Our weekly garden journals, and our incredible feature visits. Got to make sure I put myself back in. All right. It's time for the monthly gardening book club, everybody. Let's get it started. Oh my gosh, where is this at? I'm having so much fun with all of my all of this stuff I got to do here. So, all right, monthly gardening book club. So, all right, first, let's welcome back to the stage our good friend, Mark Boucher Colbert, our co-host for the monthly gardening book club. And like we said already in the show, earlier in the show, we are featuring Scott Wilson's Gardener Scott's Guide to Raised Bed Gardening. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Great
Excellent,
book, man.
excellent.
This is a great book.
Yeah, this was really great. And again, like I said, just been talking about it. Gardner Scott's been such a wonderful contributor and friend of our show. So definitely awesome to be able to get right on it and get to this book as soon as it's been published and get to talking about it right away. And really, like you said, wonderful book. Just been really just going through this the last couple of weeks, and it's just full of so much great overall gardening information, let alone just raised bed gardening.
Yeah, you know what I really liked about this book and the last book? You know, we did Kim Stoddart's book, The Climate Change Resilient Vegetable Garden, last time, and we got Gardner Scott this time. These books are just so well illustrated, so many photographs, so much visual input. You know, a couple of 3 months ago, we had done, or 2 months back, was
Right.
What We Sow, and that was more of like a meditative book. You know, just you entered the words and you're reading, and the stories came across. But these books are like hands-on visual pictures. You're just really entering into the garden by seeing this stuff. So big props to these guys for really loading up the pictures and really, you know, one way I read the book, the first way I read the book is almost like just looking at the pictures and the captions. That's the first run through. And that's like a mini book in and of itself, just that. So that, you know, you learn a lot. I learn a lot that way.
Yeah, exactly. I do very similar thing. It's, you got to do the run through, especially with books, books that are more just text, you just know you got to dig right into that sort of thing. But books that are a little bit more visual and got a lot of other things involved with them, it's really good to do that first run through when you do it. And you just reminded me too, before we really dig in here too, is that Gardner Scott's book is actually our 12th book, which makes a year.
Woo!
Of the monthly gardening book club. How
That
about
is
that?
awesome.
A year's
I know.
worth of
April,
the
we
gardening.
started Ellen Jacobs last April, right?
Yeah. So here we are, a year later, basically, and here with our good friend gardener Scott Wilson. Let's get him in on the show here and talk all about this great book.
Hey,
Scott Wilson.
Hey, Mark.
First, let's introduce you to, I guess, because
nice to meet you too.
Scott's usually here on the third weekend of the month doing his Q&A, and he's usually in the background watching your In the Garden segment with all of us as well, too. So it's kind of great now to finally get you guys to introduce to each other and to finally meet. And we get to meet over this just really wonderful book, Scott.
Thanks.
It's just, wow. Just
congratulations. I mean, it's an achievement.
Congratulations.
To be a gardener is one thing, but then to be able to summarize it all in a great book like this, that's congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, it is one of those things that, it takes a few days to put together.
Just a few days, I can imagine.
How long would you say, obviously, you've been gardening for a long time, you're taking notes, you're writing stuff down, but when did the actual idea of writing a book occur to you, and how long did it take to take its shape?
So I've had a number of people, particularly when my channel started getting really big on YouTube, a lot of people suggested along the way that I should write a book, but I never really took it too seriously until a couple different publishing companies actually contacted me and asked me to write a book. And that's what got the ball rolling. And so from the point that I had my initial discussions with Firefly Publishing, it was almost exactly 2 years from that point until the book was published.
Nice. Wow, that's a pretty fast timeline.
It's relative. It's of that 2 years, it's broken into different phases. The actual writing of it and the layout was about a year. And most days in that year were spent writing notes, actually writing the text, taking pictures, figuring out where those pictures would go. So the book has over 300 pictures, and I took over 3,000 pictures.
Oh, yeah.
I had intended as content for the book. So it's just one of those things that, I mean, that takes a lot of time to go through thousands of pictures to whittle it down to the ones that you think are worthy of the book.
Totally. My God. Wow. It's its own
Yeah.
labor, right? I mean, it's kind of like what Enoch does. It's like you're a gardener, but then you do this other project that's over and above all your gardening, right? So a book is kind of like that. It's like you do all your gardening tasks, but then you have to have all the book time too.
Exactly. And, you know, and I luckily, because I've been doing YouTube for a while, I figured out how to work the schedule so that if I had a gardening task, if it fit with YouTube videos, then I could make a video and I could tie it all together. And so I kind of use that same mindset with a lot of the book development. That last year when I was doing the bulk of the pictures and writing and editing, a lot of my gardening was specific to what was going to be in the book. And you know, in some ways that made it easier, but then in other ways, you know, it did take away from some of the enjoyment and some of the normal gardening activities I would have done because it was so focused on getting the book.
Interesting. Can you give us the elevator speech? How would you're stuck in an elevator with somebody going up some big tower to,
there you go.
To meet with your agents at Firefly. They're like, oh, what do you do? And this is like, what is this book about? Tell us.
Yes. So I look at it as a comprehensive guide to gardening. And so that's why I spend so much time early in the book on just planning what kind of garden you want, to planning what kind of gardener you're going to be, and then developing that into a garden. Now, of course, the book focuses on raised bed gardens, but the idea is just become a gardener. And before you put the first plant in the ground, you've got to figure out why you're doing it. So there's that philosophical aspect of it. Then, of course, it's geared partly towards the brand new gardener, so that you could pick up this book and be able to see how to put a seed in the ground after learning how to select that seed, and then carry the process all the way through to harvest. And then for the experienced gardener, it's got all those photos so you can get motivated and enthused about new opportunities and trying different types of beds. Like in your case, you know, the herb spiral, doing new things that you hadn't seen before that suddenly sound interesting. So I wanted to have that aspect in the book as well. So it's got something for everybody, regardless of what garden level you're at.
Yeah. I thought that was, a really great thing about it. And it's like really, besides just raised bed gardening, which it's focused on, is, a really overall great guide to just gardening. If you're just getting started, it is just a good place to get started if you wanted just really great, good science and experience-based garden knowledge.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? Is what this book is really about, and that's kind of something I was mentioning to Mark just before the show as well, too, is that you can read the experience through it. And one of the other things I really enjoyed about this book, too, as well, because we've been talking about it. We talked about it the last time you were on the show with us as well, but now that I've had a chance to actually read it, it was really great because I felt like, in a way, I was kind of hanging out with Gardner Scott during the show, and we were doing I was learning all this great garden knowledge, which I always get from all of your videos and content anyways, but it reads like that as well too, which is really great. Thanks. I mean, you really take people along with your garden experience.
Thanks. Yeah. And almost all of the photos in the planning and building and growing and harvesting, almost all the photos are from my garden. And so I really did try to do exactly that. Take people along the journey so that I'm not just spouting off things that we all see in a video or somebody else's book, but you could actually see the correlation that when I'm talking about doing the planning and the planting and the weeding and the trellising and the plant protection, all of those things are actually being done by me in the garden. And I'm glad you said that, because that really was an underlying tone that I tried to set.
Yeah, you do a great job too of, I think as you get on in the gardening journey, you assume so many things, and when we have a mind that's many years into gardening, it's easy to forget how a beginner would approach gardening, or what questions a beginner, and maybe it's as a result of having a YouTube channel and interacting with the public a lot in an educational format. But you do a great job of, really spelling things out, from even like how deep to plant a seed, very simple things that it gets easy to assume that everybody knows this stuff after a while, because it's so familiar to you. But you do a great job of really taking people through every step if they need that kind of help.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thanks, Mark. Yeah, YouTube definitely helped. My best performing video on my channel, with almost 4.5 million views, is how to fill a raised bed. And at the time, I thought, this is so simple. I don't need to make this video. And then I realized that, well, no, I'll make it more than just the basic information. And then, of course, once it blew up and became such a big video, I realized, yes, it is the simple things, that stuff that we assume, because we've been doing it for decades, that everybody knows. But that's the stuff that we took decades to learn. And so that really was that one video, which is now 5 years old. That was kind of a moment that I thought, oh, this raised bed thing has a future, and I should be focusing more on the simplicity of it and the benefits of it. And that, of course, led eventually to the book with all this information that you were highlighting.
Yeah. So again, too, there's just, as I look at, the beginning and the different chapters we've got here in this book, it just fulfills so many different things. I think how in the world do you, again, approach this after, the book company comes to you and says, you want to write a book, you come up with the idea, raised bed. Then how do you, after that, start to compile all of this stuff that you're going to put together in a book? And then, do you just start from chapters and think of that? Or how do you break it down from all of this great amount of knowledge you have, and then start to break it into pieces like you have?
Yeah, I'm looking at the same page that you are, the table of contents. And I remember when we were first talking, when I was first talking with Firefly Publishing, and I laid out the table of contents at their request. What did they think this book would look like? And so I basically spent a few days figuring out what that basic framework might look like, and then presented it to them. This was before they had committed to doing a book. And so that first table of contents had 14 chapters. That's how I envisioned the book was going to lay out. And as you look at the table of contents, you'll see that it has 8 chapters.
Yeah.
And so that's what we agreed to, was the basic concept of the information that would be contained within those 14 chapters. But then as I started writing it and I started putting it together, for instance, in the original proposal, chapter 3 was going to be the benefits of raised beds. And I had 50 different benefits.
Wow.
And then I broke down each of those into more fleshed out material. And so that's kind of how it began, was just these ideas and then developing these ideas. But I wanted to make sure I covered both sides. So chapter 4 was going to be the cons of raised bed gardening. And I had actually 35 things of why you might not want to do raised bed gardening. I fleshed all that out. And so the editor, I worked with two different editors, but the first editor sent me a message saying, oh, I love chapter 3. I read it. I wanted to get out. I wanted to grow everything I could possibly grow in raised beds. And then I read chapter 4, and it was such a downer that I wasn't sure that I wanted to do it anymore.
Oh my God.
And so the pros and cons evolved into essentially, rather than having a single chapter devoted to both, to take that information and kind of use that as an underlying current throughout the book. So that as I talked about soil, I then talked about the benefits of using soil in a raised bed. And when I talked about weather protection, it was how raised beds can benefit your garden when you encounter different types of weather. And we did the same thing with pests. So if it was a benefit, depending on how the text read, I would then also tie into that, but it might not be the best idea if you live in this area or if you're practicing these kind of things. And so the book evolved over time to take some of this very specific information and just include it in multiple areas. In the original plan, I had a chapter on how to save money in raised bed gardening. And the second editor I worked with said, why don't we just put little tips throughout the book, little boxes that say, do this thing, and here's a way you can save money. So in many ways, that's the editor's job, is to pull out the best readable material. So, to answer your initial question, the initial writing of the book really didn't reflect what the finished product was. I wrote over 90,000 words.
Wow.
And the book ended up being closer to about 65,000 words. So there's a lot of stuff that was cut out of it as well.
Yeah. And real quick here, David from Bowtie Life of the Garden has a good follow-up question here. From 14 to 8 chapters, and there's some major reorganizing. Does that mean you have enough fleshed out material for another 2 or 3 books?
Maybe
I was just thinking, maybe it would be an interesting way to kind of why you don't want to do something. I think would be a way if you could twist the writing right and do it right. That would be an interesting, on its own type of thing.
Yeah, no, I've definitely highlighted some of the stuff that didn't make it into this book, and I am saving it for potential books in
future projects.
They won't be lost.
I like how Tony O'Neill, one of our interviewees with his book Simplify Vegetable Gardening, just said, sometimes it's better to simplify, right? He's got that simplify theme. There we go. All right, Scott, make the case for, I love how you can argue for and against. I mean, it's not just you're not just a one-trick pony. You could go both ways. You got 50 pluses, but you got 35 minuses. Give us 3 big pluses of raised bed gardening and three big minuses. Why would people, for and against? Give us a little argument for and against.
So one of the biggest benefits, and I talk about this in a few different ways in the book, is the soil. So here in Colorado, my soil is terrible. It has less than 1% organic matter naturally. The nutrient levels are extremely low for the most part. It's either clay or it's sand, and there's some regions near me in their backyard they've got both clay and sand. I mean, it's just terrible soil. And so to grow a garden in the soil in my area, you just can't do it. There are no farms anywhere near me because you just can't grow commercially, let alone if you don't have the experience or the knowledge to do it in your backyard. And so a raised bed allows you to start with good soil. You, instead of trying to grow in the soil that's terrible, you just build your bed and then fill it with very good soil. You can determine what kind of soil that is. You can manage the fertility of the soil, the nutrient levels of the soil, the structure of the soil. And for me here, and for many gardeners in similar situations, the soil is a key reason for raised bed gardening.
Yeah.
But you go back to many of the gardening books that have been written over the last 100 years by people who live in South Carolina or Virginia or Southern California or even some parts of Oregon. The soil can be planted in. And so you don't need to take that extra effort of building a bed and then filling that bed with soil because you already have good soil.
Yeah.
And so there's a key pro and con. And so now when you tie the next one, which is the cost factor of it. And so I'll start with the con part, which is raised bed gardening can be expensive. If you have to build the beds and then fill the beds with soil, there is an expense there that some gardeners can't afford, or some gardeners choose not to spend. And I counter that with the pro being that by building that bed, particularly the rectangular beds that many of us have in our vegetable gardens, you can intensify the number of plants that you're actually growing within that given space. And so you can keep it simple. You can use reclaimed lumber at no cost. You can use some of your native soil and then make your own compost to mix into the soil. So you can reduce the costs of the soil that you're filling the bed with, and you can reduce the cost of the bed. But even if you spend the money to make the bed, it pays back that expense in very little time by just having the increased ability to control the growth of your plants, to manage the pests better and manage the weather better. And so, my beds, I built most of my primary garden beds about 5 years ago, and building the bed and filling the bed 5 years ago was about $150 per bed. Now the feedback I get from people who are following my video and commenting on it, it's twice that much. So if you're going to build just a simple raised bed made out of wood, a high bed, and fill it with soil, you're going to spend $250 to $300. When you can make that money back in the first or second year, now you actually end up making money essentially into the future, where you can get so much more produce in your vegetable garden in a raised bed than you can in open ground, that it pays for itself. And I have some statistics, of course, in the book where I talk about some studies in the Chicago area talking about how much more can be harvested in a raised bed. So those are two things. And then when we get to the third one that you asked for, I think age plays a factor. So some of us have bad backs and we don't get around as well as we used to. And so you can build a bed with a very sturdy frame. I like my solid 2x10 double stacked beds because I can sit on them and not worry about the pain that's going to be inflicted on my back. I can do the seeding, I can do the weeding, I can take care of those beds with very little physical strain. And even for gardeners who have mobility issues where they can't bend over at all, you can build the bed to match you exactly. I've got two different photos in the book. One with one of the students I worked with at the Galileo Garden in a wheelchair watering the bed. And then another one from the Denver Botanic Garden, which was a raised bed that was designed for rolling a wheelchair underneath the bed and then working at shoulder and chest level with the plants inside. So the ability for gardeners of all different abilities to garden can be sustained when in raised bed gardening. But of course, the con to this is some of what we already talked about. If you don't have mobility issues, then you don't have to worry about those kind of things, at least right now. So it might not make sense to build that big sturdy bed because you don't need to do it. And then the cost factor as well, depending on what mobility issues you are. I've corresponded with a number of gardeners who have just said, it's too much work and too much expense for me to build the kind of bed that I would need to build. So I just don't garden. And I think that, is kind of sad. I like to offer the alternative, which is come up with the raised bed gardening option that works best for you.
Yeah, definitely. Real quick here, Will Dog in the Soil was asking, because you were kind of talking about tall raised beds. At what point do you feel raised bed height reaches diminishing return?
Interesting.
Yeah, so I think it depends on the gardener. So I have a 32-inch high bed,
Mm-hmm.
and it's still empty because for me it's a metal bed, and I wanted to get it, and at some point I will finish the project, but it was just too much to fill because I do all the work myself. And when I
Yeah.
fill a bed that's 16 inches high, that takes a couple days. It takes time to lay out. I always do the bottom with logs and branches and wood chips and leaves and some of my own native soil. So that takes a while. Pushing my wheelbarrow back and forth and carrying the logs and everything. And then it takes at least a day to get all the materials and get them all mixed up and then put into the bed. And that is with a 16-inch bed that I can devote 2 days to filling. So when I talk about a 32-inch bed, it's going to take me 4 or 5 days just to fill that bed with my normal activity because I don't want to hurt myself. I got a bad back. So, I got to dig, mix, push, fill. And so
Mm-hmm.
it takes time. And so for me, above about 24 inches is when I start seeing diminishing returns. It's when it's more effort for me personally than I think it's worth. And most plants grow 8 to 16 inches of
Yeah.
soil. And
Yeah.
so a bed that is 32 inches deep, the bottom half is useless as far as the plants are concerned. So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
there's going to be a lot of logs in there. There's going to be a lot of fill with my terrible
Yeah.
soil, but I only need that top portion to actively be good, healthy soil.
Mm-hmm.
And unless I had a mobility issue that I needed a 32-inch high bed, it's just not worth the time, the energy, the expense that might be associated with bringing in some of those amendments as well, because I don't make that much compost to be able to free up that what I would need for that bed. So uh, I have 22-inch high beds, my galvanized steel beds, and I spent months filling those beds. So I would fill like a 12-foot long section. It's a square with 25 feet on each side. And so I would do like half of one side, about 12 feet over a course of a couple days. And then I would do the next one over the course of a couple days. And then I would get that all set up and I would put some seeds and I might do some mulch. And then I would gradually work my way around. And those 22-inch high beds basically took me about 2 months to fully fill and incorporate into my soil. So
Wow. Yeah.
that's what I look at when I talk about the
Mm-hmm.
diminishing returns, because you don't need a high bed if you don't have those mobility issues.
Yeah. All right. Real quick, Mark here. I'm sorry. Beatrice was asking, is it a good idea to fill raised beds with plastic recycling on the bottom and then put cardboard on top of it and then put your soil? Or maybe not plastic. I don't think I would recommend that or anything, but maybe anything else besides logs and stuff like that, maybe?
Yeah, I don't recommend plastic either. I like to have an interface with the native soil. And so I learned a number of years ago
way of putting it.
that earthworms, of course, unless they're jumping worms and you're trying to get rid of them, earthworms can be an amazing ally when you're dealing with soil development. And if you put a barrier at the bottom of your bed, you're shutting out a big portion of the soil life that can actually benefit your bed. Now, that being said, I have hardware cloth at the base of all of my beds because I've got gophers and voles and I don't want them burrowing into the bed. So a barrier like that keeps burrowing animals out is okay, but I don't see the need for plastic of any type. As far as cardboard, I don't think it's necessary in most cases. Cardboard can be a pretty effective barrier for both oxygen and water. And so that interface is essentially shut down even
Mm.
with cardboard until that cardboard breaks down, and it
Mhm.
might take months for it to break down. I the question I probably get asked most about raised bed gardening, and it's this issue about the cardboard, is how do you keep weeds from growing up through the bed? Well, most of the weeds that we have as gardeners are going to be smothered by 8 inches of soil or more. And then they're going to break down and decompose and actually enrich the soil. So we don't need to put a cardboard layer on top of the grass or the weeds, even if the weeds are seeding. If you cover them with soil that is 16 inches deep, those seeds are
Yeah.
not going to germinate and they're not going to grow. So even in that case, I don't see a need for cardboard. I did experiment a little bit with lasagna gardening, and I did the classic lasagna garden
Mm.
where you put the cardboard down and then you put the different layers of organic matter. And after a year, at least here in my dry Colorado climate, even though I watered that bed on a regular basis, a year later, when I was actually putting plants in, the cardboard was still intact in a number of
Hmm.
areas of that bed. So it doesn't break down as quickly as people think it does.
Yeah. I mean, one thought, it just seems like if you're in an expansion mode in your garden, you could almost use the new raised bed. I see some people commenting to this effect, to just collect prunings, whatever your weeds that you're dumping in there, and you can almost keep it covered so nothing will regrow, but you could be
Exactly.
adding to this bed over time and sort of incrementalizing how you're going to fill it. And then when you finally have enough collected, that would be the time to plant it, and you're halfway there, or you're more than halfway there. Let me get to I want to talk about construction though. You dedicate about 30 pages to construction. So that's like a
Mhm.
tenth of the book with some really great practical tips. Tell us who's going to want to construct their own beds and who doesn't want to do that, or what kind of beds are best
Yeah.
for the novice, or what do you need some real carpentry experience to tackle? Tell us from your experience.
Yeah, so I think, and the reason that it's the first bed I show how to build in that chapter is the basic wooden bed.
Mm-hmm.
If you can saw a board in half, and if you
Yeah.
can hammer a nail, then you can build a raised bed.
Mm-hmm.
And because
Yes.
the basic idea is you take 3 boards of the same length and you cut one of them in half, and then you nail them together to make a rectangle. And
Mm.
that's it.
Yeah.
That's as simple as it is. I move it to the next level, which is to screw the boards together so that adds more stability, because over time with just a nail the boards will separate. The depth of the soil will push out on the sides, and
Mm.
you can expect that the bed will fail if you just use nails. But that is the easiest answer. And I made a video 5 years ago when I was building my beds, and I showed that process. And it was interesting because I had some people who obviously had some handyman or carpentry skills that were saying I shouldn't have used Phillips head screws because they can strip out if you don't use the bit correctly. That I should be using, then of course everybody had their favorite type of screw I should be using to make that bed. But then I also got comments from people saying, "Thank you so much for making this video, because I've I didn't know how to use my portable drill to screw into wood, and now I
Right.
do." And
Yeah.
so, something as simple, we were talking about this, the simplicity, something as simple as just connecting boards together. There are a number of gardeners that want to do it, but just literally don't know
Mhm.
how to put a screw into a board and then attach it. So that's how I approached the how-to section, was for people that had no idea how to do it. And then, of course, I included in the text some of that advanced stuff, like adding angle brackets to hold the boards together. You know, there's different levels of what you can do when you build a raised bed. So those examples of the wooden raised bed, I think, highlight different skill levels. But you know, it advances up to the stone raised bed, and it just using stacked stone. And so that's one of those that you could look at it as, wow, making a stone raised bed is difficult. But when I show that all you do is just stack in a staggered manner the stones, anyone can do it. And so it's a matter of how much effort you want to spend to build your raised bed. But sometimes what looks to be the most difficult bed can be one of the easiest beds to build.
Well, one thing I really took from your book, it hit me in a way that I'd never really thought about, is you also said match the bed style to what's going to be growing in there and the longevity, because you know, obviously for a beginner, that wooden box is going to be great for whatever, because it just gets them going. But you know, you and I know that, and you allude to this in the book, that there's a maintenance requirement on all these things, and wood is going to be the first thing to break down. So if you're looking at a really permanent perennial bed, like let's say you want to do a bed of asparagus that could grow for 60 to 80 years, you know, that might be the one you want to do in stone, because you don't want your bed falling apart 5 years into it and then having to rebuild around it. It's very awkward. So I thought that was a great tip. It's like match the material to the longevity. So if you're doing annual flowers, wooden boxes make total sense, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thanks for saying that. A couple of those photos that I included in the book that showed what you shouldn't do when you are building a raised bed with the wrong kind of material around a plant, like a tree that's going to grow much bigger than the bed.
Yeah.
Those were actually taken in my yard. When I first moved in, I had a blank slate, and I showed one picture in the book that shows the empty field I started with in my backyard. But I also had areas where the people who had lived in my house before had done it wrong. And I took pictures of that. And some of those pictures made it into the book, because that is a very common tendency where people don't think about the plant they're growing and what the plant is going to look like in 10 years and or what the bed is going to look like in 10 years.
Yeah. I was also going to mention too here, as I was looking at these do-it-yourself raised beds, in the stone ones too. Your herb spiral kind of makes me think about the seed
The snail.
burrito thing, seed snail that we were talking about a little bit earlier, doing a very similar thing. But you know, just you can kind of have fun with these as well too, in some of these stone raised beds as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And they don't need to be permanent. So I didn't take pictures of my last house. I had built a stone wall. It wasn't so much a raised bed as I had used it as a retaining wall that I then planted in around one area of my house. And I did use mortar between the stones for that, because I wanted it to be permanent, and it was about 4 to 5 feet high, and I wanted it to stay in place. But the stone beds that I show in the book and that I have in my garden now have no mortar. It's just the stacked stone. And one of the things after I built those beds, and I got a new puppy last year, the height of those beds, particularly for a young dog with lots of energy, was the ideal spot to jump up into and then look around, like, where am I going to jump next and what am I going to run to? And so both of my dogs, as they're running and playing, they would run right on top of those stone raised beds and look down at the other, you know, in their little dominant play posture. And so the project I've been working on for the last couple of weeks has been making those beds higher, because it's just a simple matter of stacking more stone on top of the beds that are already in place. and finding that happy point where it doesn't add too much extra effort for me, but it's high enough now to actually keep the dogs out when they're playing.
Yeah, yeah. Real quick, just a couple here. I just wanted to mention too. I didn't see in here, but what do you think of? And we're talking about height and people with disabilities and these sort of things. Elevated raised beds,
And
off the
so,
ground.
yeah, and so the
That are
biggest
up there.
issue, and this ties into what Mark had asked a little bit earlier, the biggest issue is what you're going to make it out of. And so
Right. Yeah.
the construction of it and the material you use is important. And
Yeah.
so the Denver Botanic Garden is welded steel, and it's going to last for decades, and that's not an issue. But I've seen examples, and I've corresponded with people who built an elevated raised bed, and so that's the terminology I use, just to make sure that people understand we're talking about a bed that is actually off the ground. Is that uh, in the construction they used plywood as the base, and
Yeah.
plywood, while it might be strong and durable for house construction, even an exterior plywood, if it's subjected to continually wet conditions, like at the
Yeah.
bottom of a bed that is
Mm-hmm.
the point where all the water is draining to, that plywood is going to fail. So you
Yeah.
have to take
I
those
think that's
kind of
probably
things
Kelpie's
into account.
experience that she's sharing in the comments
Oh
right
yeah,
now too.
exactly.
It's just, yeah. I mean, it is really about material. I learned that. I learned that a long time ago in my first ones, because I have a cemented back patio. It's one of my only places. At first, before I discovered other more creative ways of gardening, but that was my only place for a garden bed in a sense. So in a way, that was one of my first visions of that patio, was creating elevated raised beds. And I used some cheap wood. I had problems with the bottoms rotting out on me and falling apart and things like that. And so yeah, there is a point where you've got to really put in some solid, and now mine are, the bottoms are solid, 2x4s, and you know what I mean? And I make sure that whatever wood material I use is going to last for years, because it will break down.
Exactly.
It will break down.
And that's a good example also, I think, of matching the plant to the bed, because depending on what you want to grow, an elevated bed might not be the best choice for a vegetable garden. If you have
Hmm.
other options like a container, a pot, a green stock tower, those might be better options on a patio or a deck than to try to build an
Yeah.
elevated raised bed. But if you want to grow something like succulents, I've got a picture in the book of an elevated bed, and
Hmm.
it's a beautiful bed of rustic wood that has weathered in time, and there
Yeah.
are succulents growing in that bed, so you don't need a lot of water, and you have less concern that that wood is going to break down because
Yeah.
of all the watering. And so by matching something like that, where the type of plant doesn't require the material water that would break
Yeah.
down the wood, then
Yeah.
maybe it would be a really nice visual element that you can add.
Yeah. Real quick, in the soil. Sorry, Mark. I
Yeah,
do want to try to make sure
no.
we're getting these questions in real quick.
Yeah,
But
there's some great questions.
let's see. Will Dog was asking, my bed is next to a chain link fence. How could I convert that to a raised bed without grass, weeds growing between the fence and bed? So
Yeah, so if
maybe
you
we're doing
can,
something in between them. Yeah.
uh, use the fence as a back wall, essentially. So be it, I showed in the book, and I showed in a video last year how I built a bed using cement board,
Hmm.
a water resistant material. And so that might be a suitable use for something like that, where at least the back wall would be flush with the fence,
Yeah.
and that, you'd still have weeds grow out on the other side of the fence, but you really wouldn't have anything between the fence and the bed, because you're using the fence as part of the support for that back wall. And whether the bed was made out of all four sides cement board or not, that really doesn't matter. You could use any type of impermeable material like that, be it cement board or really heavy duty landscape fabric, and then just put the bed right up against the fence so that you are reducing the likelihood of plants growing between the two. That's the approach I would take.
Yeah.
Enoch, you want to tackle any other question right now, or?
No, I think if you got the next one.
Yeah. So, it seems like one of the major advantages, and you focus on at the end of the book on this, is all the different things you can attach to a raised bed. And I'm talking about trellises, I'm talking about season extension devices. So talk to us a little bit about that and the advantages of raised bed gardening with respect to all those kinds of things.
Yeah, I absolutely love that as an advantage with raised beds. And so over the years, like many people, I have hoops and I use PVC, I've used metal conduit. Those were the first things I learned to bend into a hoop to put into a bed. And I did some of that in in-ground beds, but I find that in the raised beds, they are just extremely easy to use because the sides of the bed actually help hold those bendy structures in place. And you could use rebar, and I have a video and I talk about that in the book as well, where you put like a 2-foot long piece of rebar in the bed, and then you just slip the end of the hoop on top of that rebar. And there is some sideways tension, particularly with the PVC pipe. It wants to expand out and straighten again. And so you use that tension against the inside sides of the bed, and it holds the hoop in place very, very effectively. What I'm doing now, and this is my favorite way to use a structure in my raised beds, is I have bent cattle panel.
Yeah, that's
and they're not unbending. They don't have that tension. Once they're bent, they stay bent. It's a really heavy gauge steel. And so those are sized to my raised beds. And I just will move them if I decide I'm growing something different in a bed from one year to the next. I'll just pick up those cattle panel hoops and move them to other beds, or move them out completely and stack them up on the side. And so essentially now, all of those structures that I use in my raised beds are pre-sized. And so I can move the hoop in and out. I can use the conduit or the PVC in and out, and everything fits the beds that I have them fitted to. And then the same with plastic cover during the shoulder months, or fleece fabric, or shade cloth, or hail cloth, or insect netting. All of those are also pre-sized for my beds. And so I just go to my shed and pull out whichever cover I need, and it's going to fit my bed. And that's a big reason why my vegetable garden beds are all the same size and all the same basic design, because I can interchangeably use all of these beneficial aspects. And so the cattle panel, I use higher hoops as trellises, and it's the same thing. They're already bent, and I can just move them from one bed to the next. I use them as a trellis. And raised beds just make it so easy to have that interchangeability, because you do it once to build the structure, and then the materials, and then from then on, it's essentially very little effort.
Yeah.
I will say this as a follow-up. First, God bless you for having to use hail cloth.
Yes,
That's a challenge we don't really have to face here. So that's quite a and you get that all summer long, right? With the thunderstorms, hail can come at any time.
Yeah, the potential is there all summer long.
Yeah.
The issue is you don't know which storm is going to bring the hail. So that's one reason why that galvanized steel bed area I was talking about, that's 25 feet on each side to form a square. I have a large single sheet of hail cloth that covers that entire area all summer long, because I just never know when the hail is going to hit. I will look at the weather forecast, and if it looks like a storm has potential for hail, then I can go out and use those smaller sheets to cover my smaller beds. But yeah, my approach has just been try to cover the whole garden all at once and not worry about it. And it's only happened, so I put that up 4 years ago. In 4 years, there have only been 3 heavy duty hailstorms that would have devastated my garden.
Yeah.
But the hail cloth that covered that whole area protected all the plants. So, now you have to weigh the benefit. Over the course of 4 years, I only needed it 3 times.
Yeah.
But those 3 times would have essentially ended my gardening season. So it was well worth the effort. There was one year, and I've told this story in my live stream occasionally. I lived not too far from where I am now, and I had to plant my garden 3 times that year because I started all my tomatoes and peppers, everything from seed, put it out. About 2 weeks after planting, a hailstorm came and annihilated everything.
Oh my God.
And so then, of course, I went to the local nursery and the garden centers and replaced all the plants. They lasted for about a month, and another storm just annihilated everything. And so the third planting did not include as many plants, and I had missed the season on some of those plants, but I was able to actually get to harvest point for some of the plants. It wasn't a complete bust, but yeah, that's what
that's a rough season. Oh, that's a rough season right there.
Let me do a little follow up on the cattle panel stuff, because I find that material really interesting and super useful. But I think maybe folks who aren't familiar with it, if you go to a big box store like Home Depot or Lowe's, I can find their concrete reinforcing wire, which is a thinner wire mesh comes in sheets that are approximately 4x8. It's a little less than that. So, if you go with a large car with a large trunk or a rented U-Haul truck or whatever, you can get those very easily. They're not as sturdy as the cattle panel, but they're serviceable. The cattle panel I found available only at like farm supply stores, like a Wilco. But the challenge that I found is that it comes in like 16-foot long sheets. So sometimes if I'm going like with a U-Haul truck, I bring a set of bolt cutters with me. So I can cut it down to the size that will fit in the truck, and or pre-cut. Because the 16-foot, if you're not having a lot of them delivered, that is a very unwieldy size to try to pick up with any standard vehicle.
Absolutely. And I talk a little bit in the book about the sizing of the hoops. And I've made some videos about the cattle panel. Depending on the height of your hoop, that will determine the length of the material that you need to use. So like a 10-foot long PVC pipe is going to give you a hoop that's a little less than 4 feet high. And so my cattle panels, for the most part, I do exactly what you're talking about. They're cut in half. And so I use 8-foot lengths. And after that 8-foot is bent to fit side to side in a 4-foot wide bed, that gives me a hoop that's about 2.5 feet high. And it is much more manageable in a truck, with a trailer, with a U-Haul, to move 8-foot sections like you're talking about with the concrete reinforcement panels. 8-foot is much easier to move than 16 feet. So if you anticipate the size of the hoop you're going to use, bolt cutters, definitely a very effective way. One of the very first videos I made 13 years ago, I think, no, more than that. I showed how I was making some hoops like that in the garden, and I was using a grinder and a jigsaw with a metal blade, and by far bolt cutters are the best way to cut that heavy gauge steel of the cattle panels.
Yeah, that is kind of an issue. Me, I got to find a friend with a truck.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, can you come down with me and get a couple of cattle panels or whatever? But luckily for me, the place where I got my cattle panels, they had some bolt cutters and were willing to cut them
Oh,
for
good.
me.
Yeah.
But it is a good idea to be thinking about that ahead of time. Maybe
Yeah.
call and find out if they can do that. If not,
Yeah,
get
they
some
might be able to
yourself
do
or
it. Some
something like that.
places will cut it for you. And
Mm.
Adam's point was a good one as well. That
Mhm.
if you bend the 16-foot cattle panel into a teardrop and basically tie the ends together, they can
Mm.
actually fit into the back of a full-size pickup
No,
truck.
that's a
Oh,
good
good
idea.
point. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a
Like
good
if you
idea.
want it, because I've got some cattle panels where I use the entire 16-foot length to make an arch in the garden.
Mm.
And so if you want the length, then you've got to figure out a way to transport it and not bending it necessarily to a permanent shape, but just holding the ends together so that you can move it really does work out.
I got essential garden equipment, a friend with a truck, and of course I got Adam Burley, my good friend, just right up the road. He's like, I'm
There
just
you go.
down the road. Come and call me up.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
awesome.
I will too, Adam. Thanks. So anyways, we got lots and lots of great ideas for putting together some really great raised beds. Real quick though, before I move on though, just quick question. Out of all of your different raised beds out of there, which ones was your favorite?
And so I think it's an evolving process. You know,
Yeah.
when I built my very first wooden raised bed at the house I'm in now, that was my favorite because that signified the beginning of this new journey, new house,
Mm.
new garden, first bed, and that bed is still one of my favorites because I know it was the first bed that I built at this house. And then when I started getting into metal raised beds, particularly the ones that are the kits and they have the colors, and I began to use the color of the metal as part of my garden design, actually
Mm.
bringing some height and color to the garden. Those became favorites, and I still love those beds. I have strawberries in those beds. I like the idea of having rooms within the garden. So different sections of the
Mm.
garden have different purposes as a distinct bed or like a distinct section for vegetable garden is different than the section for the pollinator plants, which is different than the section for the pots and the annuals. And so having dividing zones that can also be raised beds, I think is a design component that when I started doing that with the metal raised beds, I really liked that. And so that became my favorite for a while, where those long metal raised beds delineated two complete different areas of my garden and they tied in with both sections of the garden. So really liked that. And then by the time I evolved to my stone raised beds, where stone is just so vibrant and just has such a nice visual element
Mm.
in the garden, that now my stone raised beds are my favorite beds because they just they really have anchored that area of my garden as not only a visual component but just the sheer weight of a stone bed visually. And this is what I've kind of figured out. When I see them, I kind of have a mental projection that that is the anchor. That is the point of the garden where everything begins. And so I've got those
Mm.
stone beds as you walk from my house to the garden. That's the
Yeah.
first major component that you see. So I love my stone raised beds now as a major design element. And I don't
Yeah.
know what's going to be next. I'm always adding.
It's hard to have favorites, isn't it?
Yeah, it's like kids. Every time you have a new kid, you realize that the first one can't be your favorite anymore, that you have to give them all equal attention.
Mm.
That's right. That's a good
That's
analogy
cool.
there for sure. Definitely.
Yeah.
And again, so again, lots of great design ideas in the book, and a lot of that sort of stuff. Real quick, I just want to we touched on again, you were talking chapter 4 was originally some other thing that the editor didn't quite agree with, but it turned into this really great chapter on the importance of healthy soil.
Yeah.
And you kind of touched on that a little bit and talk about what it takes to fill a raised bed and everything. But what I wanted to ask real quick, because, you go through here and talk about this, and this is a question we get a lot too in gardening, is about soil composition in a sense. And so what's kind of, there's so many out there. You talk about a couple of different, soil mixes and then your own soil mix. And again, too, this idea, or in a sense, a soil mixture composition philosophy. What is that really?
Yeah, so the basic idea is that a good soil has at least 5% organic matter in it. And so, at the beginning, when I talked about how terrible my soil was, that was the first thing I mentioned, was that my soil has less than 1% organic matter. And so to get a soil, regardless of where you garden, to that point of at least 5% organic matter, that should be one of the first things that are on our goals to attain in the first year or the second year. Sometimes it takes years to develop a soil to that point. And what that has evolved into, I think, and I was victim of this as well, is a misunderstanding of what that 5% really means. Because you see a lot of people, a lot of gardeners on YouTube telling what you should do, say, put all of this organic matter in and put all that organic matter in. And one of the examples I use is Mel Bartholomew's mix for the square foot gardening. And it's just filled with compost and peat moss. And if you look at it, it's like, wow, that's way more than 5%. So how could that work? Well, the piece, when you actually start looking at the research and how some of the university studies came up with that 5%, is we're not talking about the volume. We're not talking about 5% of the soil by volume. You're talking about the mass. And so when a good soil also contains 25% oxygen, then you realize that the mass of 5% or organic matter equates to maybe a 30 or 40% of the volume of the soil. And so that's why I spend a lot of time talking about that aspect in particular, because that's kind of what we're really looking for, is about 30%. I think that's a really good target of the volume of your soil is compost and manure and worm castings and dried grass clippings and whatever the ingredients happen to be. You're looking for a substantial volume of the soil to be that organic material. And that's where the recipe comes in, or the different mixes. Is I don't think there has to be a single answer for what that organic matter is. Organic matter is going to be broken down by the microbes within the soil. And whether it is a blade of grass or that broccoli head or banana peel from your kitchen, eventually it's going to be broken down by those microbes, and the nutrients within that organic matter are going to be released into the soil. And so don't necessarily strive for a specific recipe that somebody is recommending if you can use what you already have. I like free gardening. I like using what we already have in our landscape and recycling it in our soil. And so that's why my basic recipe that I talk about in the book is flexible. It varies based on the time of year. So if I'm filling a bed in summer, there's a likelihood that that bed is going to have a lot of fresh grass clippings worked into that soil as an extra nitrogen component. If I'm filling my bed in fall, there's a very strong likelihood that that bed's going to have crushed dried leaves worked into that soil, because we all have different materials at different times of the year. And I think it's okay to incorporate whatever you have to help get that volume of organic matter in your soil.
Yeah.
That's cool. I think I just have one final question that we haven't really touched on yet. Briefly, the raised bed method lends itself to a lot of rationality, grid kind of planning, and you do devote a lot of time in your book to the garden planning. How can raised bed gardening help people plan better and execute their plan better in the garden? Just say something about that.
Yeah, I think the ideal part of the raised beds and the planning is that it can become mathematical. And I think there's a lot of people that say they don't like math, but when suddenly it's part of gardening and they see how they can incorporate it, they can realize that all you got to do is know how to multiply length times width, and you figure out what square footage you have in your garden. And then you look at the seed packet that tells you that you place the seeds 6 inches apart, and your planning is essentially done. You just have this grid that you figured out with your square footage, and you put your seeds at the appropriate spacing within that grid in your raised bed. And the thinking is taken care of, because, and that's, I've got those couple pages where I break that down and show the examples of actually a grid paper, and you put the little dot and you figure out how many you can put in a square foot. And it can make gardening or make planning so much easier by breaking it down to that smallest element. For many years, would think I needed to grow carrots or lettuce or beets or whatever it was. So I'd go to the store, I'd see a packet, I'd buy that packet, I'd take it to my garden, and then I would read the packet and say, oh, now what am I supposed to do? and it's like, oh, I need to plant it this deep and I need to plant it this far apart. And so then I would start putting the seeds into the bed, and I would stop when I thought I had enough seeds. Well, the planning part comes in where before I ever decide what that plant is going to be, I have an understanding of spacing and how it works. So if I choose beets and I see the spacing for the beets is 4 inches apart, now I know exactly how many seeds I need, and I know exactly how many seeds I'm going to sow to give me the harvest that I need. So if I think I need 60 beets, I know exactly how much space it's going to take to grow those 60 beets. And too often, and I think all gardeners are guilty of this, is we get a seed packet of beets and it might have 100 seeds in it, and we plant all 100 seeds in a very small space, and then we're left with 100 beets, and we have no idea what to do with 100 beets. So the planning is much simpler because it can be much more precise.
Awesome.
Yeah. That's again, too, another great thing about the book. It's so full of the whole aspect of gardening and all of that too. Lots of great information on the planning as you're talking about, but you also spend some good time talking about and learning from observation and all of this. Again, too, this is what kind of comes back to this idea I was telling you about. This book is really a great science and experience based approach to gardening as well too, and talking about journaling as well too. You got some pages in here just to kind of even lay out people, like sort of like you were talking about, showing people about screws or that sort of stuff. Sometimes people even need just like a layout to show you what you need just to put a journal together. What should I be doing that? You put a lot of emphasis on that too as well in the book, and I want to make sure we touch on that before we finish up today.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think observation is one of the most important things to do in the garden. And in that list you're talking about, observation appears more than once because it's a recurring issue that I think too many people don't think is as necessary. So I approach it from short term, medium term, long term. And before I put a single bed in my garden, I spend a lot of time just observing the weather, the patterns of the animals, the 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 snow melt and where the water is going to drain. I mean, there's so many things that could eventually become a problem if we didn't know about it in the beginning. So by taking the time to observe where you're gardening and what is going to happen in that space, you can start off smarter and maybe avoid some of those potential issues in the future. And then as you start building your garden and as you start growing, the observation key becomes critical. Plants talk to us. They actually will communicate how well they're doing. And we'd often talk about plants like they're people, of course. My plant loves this, and my plant loves this, the sun and this. Well, yeah, they basically do. So let's listen to how they're telling us what they like and what they love, and make note of that. So I do a lot of experimentation where I'll grow the same plant in different areas, in different beds, and then compare through observation which one is doing better, which one likes its home better than the others. That plant that looks like it wants to escape the bed because it's just so sad. Okay, you got to learn from that, and you learn through observation. And it doesn't need to be a beginning season, end of season kind of thing. It's okay to pivot halfway through the season. If you've got a plant that's just not doing well, we all love babying our plants. We love trying to give them that extra attention. We love trying to keep that plant alive, even though it doesn't like where it's at. And we waste a lot of time and effort and energy in doing that. And so sometimes through observation, we recognize it's just not working. So pull the plant and maybe put another one in its place, and then see how that does in its new home. And when the season is over, compare your notes that you've been taking over the entire season to see if it turned out the way you wanted it to turn out. Was it worse? Was it better? Was it about the same? Those are all lessons we can carry into the next season. And it starts all over again with new plants, new beds, new weather, new insect pests. And so that's why it's a journey. It's just every year is something new, and we need to think of it as new every time we do it. But we've got this experience and this knowledge that we've developed to make it easier, hopefully, as we move forward.
Yeah, definitely. Any last thoughts, Mark?
Wow. I mean, I just want to say, great, again, to highlight the book, great book. It's not only about raised beds, it's just a comprehensive approach to gardening. I really appreciated it. Thanks for all your efforts, Scott. This is like a real distillation of, I'm sure, years and years of experience. So every book is a real treasure for all the rest of us, because you did all the hard work to bring this to us. So thank you.
Oh, you're welcome, Mark. Thank you. I appreciate that. It was a work of love.
Yeah. We can feel it right coming through.
Yeah, definitely a great book. It was really just really great to just be able to dig in and read all of this and have all in one place Gardner Scott's knowledge right here. It's just really awesome. Each book club, I like to take a little piece out of a book and do a little reading as we finish up here. And because just comes right out of your final thoughts in the book here. You say, I think it's important to acknowledge that raised bed gardening is more than vegetable gardening, even if most of us use raised beds for that purpose. As I pointed out in the beginning, my vegetable garden is almost exclusively raised beds, but the bed choice is suitable for so many other plants. In recent years, I've used my raised beds to showcase annual flowers that add color throughout the garden. I've encountered many gardeners who are doing the same. I began my raised bed journey with basic wooden boxes for growing plants. Now more of my attention is on using raised beds of brick, stone, steel, and bring interesting visual elements to the garden. The more I visit botanical gardens and other gardeners' gardens, the more I want to modify what I have into something better. Though the appearance may be different, the basics of raised beds remain the same: good soil, easier planning and maintenance, better harvests and results. That is where my gardening journey has taken me. I suggest that gardeners new to raised beds begin with the basic designs, methods, and lessons from the earlier chapters to develop an appreciation of their effectiveness. For more experienced gardeners already using raised beds, I suggest trying something new and expanding your experience beyond what you're doing now by adding beds of stone or steel or some other material. For raised bed converts like me, use the examples of others to create gardens of your dreams with raised beds as the foundational components. Excellent book, Gardner Scott. Again, thank you so much
Yeah, thank
for
you.
taking
Thanks for
that
being with
couple
us.
of years and combining all of this great knowledge into such a wonderful book. I encourage everybody else too to use the links right down below in the description of this live stream here to get yourself a copy of this book and enjoy reading it yourself, as well as there's links as well too to Gardner Scott's channel too, so you can go and check him out and all of his great videos. Thanks again, Scott, for being here today and being
Thank
a
you,
part of our
Scott.
book club.
Thank you. I appreciate both of you, and thank you for having done this for a year. And maybe we'll be back on in a couple years. You never know.
Yeah. Again, like we
Let's hope.
said, in fact, real quick here, let's see if I've got this one here. I'll go back to this because Serena was trying to get in on this question, even though we answered it already. But I do want to point this up for her. She's such a great viewer of our show. Plans to write a second book include material from your first book. So yeah, maybe we'll be here in a couple of years to look at maybe a new book or some new ideas and some things that maybe didn't make it into this great and wonderful book.
Yeah, you never know. Tony's written 3 books. Once you do it, you kind of get hooked, and I could see it happening in the future, possibly. I won't commit
When
yet.
we interviewed Christy Wilhelmi on her fictional book Garden Variety, she showed us, I think we saw the first preview, she had her manuscript of the next book. She had it in her hands and showed it to us, so we got the sneak peek. So maybe something in our conversation today is the seed or the germ of the next book.
There you go.
Yeah, exactly. Great. Thanks again, Scott.
Thank
And for
you.
everybody else too. We
Thanks.
we got double Scott for our Sunday edition. So if you didn't get enough of him today on the show in this wonderful book club here, we've got a Q&A with him next week on next Sunday edition of the show as well too. I want to also remind anybody who doesn't follow Gardner Scott's channel, which I don't believe you don't, but anyways, tomorrow morning, right? Monday, Gardner Scott will be on his channel live for his own Q&A on his channel starting at, I believe, 8 a.m. Pacific time. And you can jump on and if you didn't get any questions or garden questions answered, because I know there were a few that popped in that were throughout the conversation. So if you didn't get those answered, definitely go and check out Gardner Scott's channel, link below for his live stream tomorrow morning. Excellent. Thanks again, Scott. And we look forward to seeing you next Sunday.
Bye-bye.
Hey, gardeners. Thanks for tuning in to our show today. Let's Get Growing is sponsored by IV Organic.
Hi, my name is Charles Malky, biologist and plant expert with IV Organics, where we grow cool plants and author Saving the World with the Home Garden. IV Organic 3-in-1 Plant Guard has 7 natural oils that protect your plants, not just from the summer heat as well as winter cold, but also protects your plants from damaging insects and rodents. The oils in the product include castor, cinnamon, clove, garlic, peppermint, rosemary, and spearmint. These oils are natural insect and rodent repellent oils, which are encapsulated by the base powder, offering your plants months of protection at a time. 1 application per year will suffice for protection against damaging summer sunburn and winter sun scald, but if the target is pests, application as much as 2 to 3 times a year may be necessary.
All right. We are another book club in the books. Our 12
we
book club, our 1 year
generating this shelf of we've got our 12 books or whatever it is, 11 books. I think we did one summary, but we're developing this bookshelf now of all these
I know.
incredible books. And, you know, I really found myself, even as you were reading the last couple of paragraphs there from Gardner Scott's book, and he mentions like getting inspiration for botanical gardens. I'm like, oh, Deborah Trentham, Botanical Gardens of the World. You know, I'm like keying on the books we've already read, and they're all there as kind of a resource as you continue on in your gardening journey. These things become touchstones. And I find myself reaching for the bookshelf. You know, it's like, oh, what did Tony O'Neill say in that thing on Simplified Gardening? I got to go back and look at that. Or what was that thing in the about seeds that Jennifer Jewell said? I got to go back and look at that. So it's a real great, it's a treasure, man. It's a treasure we're building up for ourselves.
Oh, this is, yeah, exactly. We've got our own like personal library we're building here through this book club. And again, too, you know, and people can go back and on our main page here for the Urban Gardener, and there's a playlist for all of our book clubs that we've had. Like I said, 12 now, and amazing authors, amazing books that we've had in this collection. And it doesn't stop here at 12 either. We've been talking now, actually, off and on here now for the last couple of weeks with each other about how we got to stop looking at books because we keep coming up with new ideas and new people for books we want to do. And we've literally got an idea for the whole next year.
Yeah, we're
we could like do and what we're looking to do.
A long time, right? We got a big waiting list.
Amazing again too, lots of great books. And again, for everybody here too, as we're closing out on our feature here, Gardner Scott's Guide to Raised Bed Gardening, really again too, Gardner Scott's one of those people, as I was telling you before we started the show too, he's really just one of those quintessential gardeners. Just a really great, well-spoken gentleman who's got a lot of great gardening experience to share. And again, too, not just experience too, and I said this a couple of times already, this is a science-based experience though too. This is a guy who's really learned and taken a process of learning and journaling, as we touched on and stuff, to put together and compile a lot of great information. We talked about too another thing, and I think this is a really great thing about Gardner Scott as well too, is that, you know, and people can go back to some of our previous interviews with him. He was a whole fighter pilot and had a whole military career he had a whole life doing that sort of stuff, you know what I mean? And now here he is in a whole nother life of just being this amazing gardener over the years too, and compiling that and being here in his channel, Gardner Scott, and doing this whole nother thing as well too, with such a great impact on the gardening community, especially with putting out a book like this.
Now he's fighting aphids and hail. That's what he's fighting now.
Exactly. Just a great, amazing book. Go get your copy. Like I
hope
said,
people are
right
getting
down
these
below.
books, because, you know, the thing I like too, after having met the author and spoken with the author, when you go back and read the book, you can hear them talking to you, right? Because now you have a personal connection through this interview. So that to me is just so enriching. I love having a personal connection with the author. And I think that's one of the things that this show brings. I mean, it's so brilliant to get these people on, have them explain their book, and then you got their voice and their personality inside your head as you're reading.
Yeah. Again, too, just it takes a book club, or what people think of a book club, to that whole nother level. You know, to be able to not just read the book, soak in all of that great information or stories or whatever the content of that book is, and then be able to go over it and talk with the actual author of the book to discuss that, you know, and as well, you know, be able to answer questions that viewers have as well too along the way, and have a great conversation about these just really amazing gardening books.
We could come up with a bumper sticker, something like, "It takes a village to make a good garden book club," or something like that.
Yeah, exactly.
You, me, the author, and all our viewers. So yeah, we got a village out here of people interested in just advancing their knowledge of gardening. I think that's what it's all about. It's just like we were talking about, the ongoing observation that's needed as a gardener. Just putting yourself opening yourself to these ideas and inspirations. You don't know when they're going to sift out. I mean, you're going to be staring at your garden one day and something from book group 2 years ago is just going to pop into your mind because you exposed yourself to that. That's how my imagination works. I'm just trying to solve a problem or just staring at the garden, and it's like, boom, something will come right into mind. And it's like, yeah, that's because I spent the time reading the books and looking at the pictures and doing all that stuff a year or two ago.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Right on. Well, here comes the time of the show. I know we're just having a great show. We're stretching out a minute or two here. But anyways, time of the show to announce our next book. He's teasing. This is a book I'm sure a lot of people have seen. This is a really, really popular book, and it's a time of year for us to really dig into tomatoes. Let's get a
Epic
look.
tomatoes.
We got Epic Tomatoes.
Oh my
Next
God.
month on the show, we will have with us Craig LaHoyer. I hope I got that right, LaHoyer. Epic Tomatoes. He'll be joining with us on the show for our book club for this next month. Excellent. Epic Tomatoes. I'm just having fun with you. I'm having fun. Like everybody doesn't know. I got to go from switch different things just to get to these different banners and stuff. So sometimes it's fun trying to remember which one I'm supposed to go back to. But anyways, yes, Epic Tomatoes. Look at this.
I can't wait.
This is such a wonderful book.
This is one of those books I've seen over the years. I've never bought it. So just, having committed to it for book group, it's like, oh man, I'm so glad to have it now and reading it.
Yeah. So this is going to be really awesome. Craig is really excited about being on the show too. As I've told you though too, he's probably got the record for the quickest response for booking. So I love it.
Excited.
I love it. It's great. It's going to be awesome to, like I said, as we just talked about too, to be able to go through this book this month. We're all growing tomatoes right now. Everybody loves tomatoes. It's one of the more popular crops in most all of gardeners' gardens. So it's great to be able to dedicate a month to looking and reading and talking all about tomatoes and different tomato varieties, and then to be able to have the author of this amazing book, Epic Tomatoes, with us for this next gardening book club. That's just gonna be awesome, Mark. It's just getting more and more exciting each and every month too.
I know, and this one is really well timed because we are right in that tomato zone. I mean, like I was just, as I mentioned earlier, transplanting all my tomatoes at this time of year. They're going to be going out in May, so it's just like I'm going to glean some nuggets from this book. I know there's going to be a big payoff here, immediate payoff.
Yeah, exactly. And this is, again, similar to, I got the same story with you too. This is one of those books, and I'm always getting books, and I'm always, going through different garden sections at different places that, have books. And I've seen this book so many times. I've flipped through the pages of this book. I've wanted to buy this book on several different perusings and all that sort of thing. So it's great that we've got Craig coming on the show for our book club, so that I finally had a reason to actually just get out and get this book.
Yeah, and let's make our first question to him. How do you actually pronounce your last name correctly?
Yeah, to make sure we got that right. Exactly.
Yeah. We'll let him introduce himself so that he says his last name, so we'll get it.
Right on. Serena says she's got Epic Tomatoes book already. So you're already ahead of the deal, and maybe a lot of you too, because like I said, this is a really popular book. Maybe a lot of you folks already have this book, but if not too, definitely get yourself a copy of this book. What I'll do is, again, for everybody, I do believe, yes, Jay just put a link in right now too for you all who are here with us, and for everybody who's on the replay right now here, if you're with us right now too, I'm gonna get in and put a link down below in the description for this book as well too, for you guys, so that you can get a copy of this and join with us this next month. And let's see here too, I want to make sure, let's get the date correct too real quick before we go here. May, so that'll be May 18th.
Yeah, back to third Sunday now.
Back to third Sunday, May 18th. We'll have Craig with us.
This book is, again, really photo heavy. I love it. Super sexy, really well laid out. It looks really awesome.
Yeah, again too. Yeah, perfect. It does, similar to like Gardner Scott's book too. Lots of pictures, lots of different cool side information. Specific
Little
side
feature
pages and
pages
stuff.
on various varieties.
Great photography, close-ups, especially when you're getting into again the great amazing varieties of tomatoes that are out there. More varieties than what can be covered in a book like this, but to get the photography, like you said, I mean, look at that, just to be getting
Oh
right in
yeah,
there,
that's good
sliced
stuff.
open side views of these.
My
Just
mouth is kind of watering right
I
now
know,
just
come
looking at
on.
that stuff.
That's good stuff.
Ah!
Right on, right on. Well, we better get to finishing up this show. Like I said, we're running a couple extra minutes today, but we're having a great show today. Thanks again, Mark. What a wonderful show. And it's so awesome always to be able to catch up with you here on our second Sunday of the month. But again, we'll go back to third Sunday of the month coming up this next month.
Well, it's my pleasure too. This was just typical of the great conversations we have with these authors, and I just love learning together. Like we're on this learning journey together, so it's really fun to be on that with you. And I'm grateful to all our authors who come on, and it's your connections that make that happen. You are the connected guy in the garden world, so I appreciate that very much.
Yeah, I work it the best I can, and like I said, one of the cool things too, and I think I kind of talked with you recently about this, is that now that we are like on the 12th book now, right? And we are into our third year of the show, and we've had all of these great, amazing garden communicators of all sorts from around the world on our show. It almost becomes a little bit now easier to book people onto the show now, because they look at and see, oh, well, you've had Gardner Scott on the show, or you've had Mark Valencia on the show, or you've had these other people who have participated doing it. And then I'll jump on and go on with you as well too. And so it does kind of become a benefit of our own success in a way too, that things
pretty soon, when we get to be a global phenomenon, people are going to be sending us their books and be like, please review my book on your show, please.
Exactly. Oh no, I do. I'm not going to talk about it on the show right now, but I'll tell you about it after the show. I do have one of those actually.
Okay. All right. Okay. It's already happening.
All right. So let's get moving on today. Thanks again, Mark. I'll see you in a few minutes.
Thanks everybody. A real pleasure. Thanks to all our viewers out there, people joining us, asking questions. Love having you all, and I can see the numbers are growing. I see new names, so that's really fun.
Yeah. And another thing too, you start looking at the numbers. Our Sunday show is really competing, as almost a more, on numbers a little bit, slightly, just a little bit better than the Saturday show, which wasn't what I was expecting and everything, but people are really enjoying the Sunday show. So we're going to keep it up. We're going to keep bringing more and more people, have some great content. In fact, I'll just tease this as well too with everybody. We got some ideas for some new things that'll be coming to the Sunday edition that we'll be testing out hopefully here at the end of the month. And I'll talk a little bit more about that next week on the Sunday show. But Mark, thank you so much for taking your time to be with us today. I'm going to close everything out here, and I'll see you in a minute. Oh, I was supposed to be me.
I'm still with you.
It was supposed to be me. All right. Here we go, everybody. Let's get this rolling. Let's finish this up. Thank you all so much for being here. Like I said, I get to going and having so much fun with this show here. I could keep talking for days about everything when it comes down to it. But we all got stuff to do. And like I said, well, I'll be talking about that next week too, on next Sunday's show, a little bit more about that idea that I just teased out about some changes or some things we're going to do here on the Sunday show. Again, though, too, some good things, and kind of goes back to that idea, things that are benefits of our own success with this show. And that is really all because of you, who all spend your time here to hang out with us and to participate with this show, and to, it just makes it a fun experience. I just, one thing too, and it was mentioned earlier in the comments, and I'll just say this real quick about, it's one thing for me as the host here to kind of facilitate between talking with two different guests on days like this, and to be able to go along with the chat as well, to include questions into the conversation as they fit in, and to do all the banners and the different things things, there's a lot to juggle around when it comes to hosting a show like this and everything, but it is so much fun ultimately when I see all of you guys participating with this show and making it so just a great experience for me to just hop into this seat every single Saturday and Sunday and hang out with all of you. So again, too, if y'all didn't get a chance to check out yesterday's Saturday show, we did have a great conversation with Jason Williams from the Cloud Gardener UK. Jason joined with us to talk about urban green spaces. We had a really, really just an in-depth conversation. I've got to have him back on the show because we didn't even touch on like half the things that I really wanted to get into and talk with him about. But he went to some places around the world to explore how they do green spaces really well and why they do green spaces really well so that he could bring it back to his city and to help urban planners in his city figure out how they can utilize and create better green spaces for where he lives there in Manchester, United Kingdom. But that applies to all around the world as well too. As cities are growing everywhere, green spaces become more and more important. So I think that it's just a great conversation that we got started with yesterday on yesterday's show. So you want to go back and check that show out yesterday with Jason Williams, Cloud Gardener UK. Plus we also got to see Audrey Crawford from Audrey's Little Farm again. Audrey joined with us a few weeks back to talk about her garden summit, her spring garden summit. And so we brought her back onto the Saturday show for our Are You Following Me segment, so we could talk all about Audrey's Little Farm and all of that as well too. So we had a great conversation with her, got to learn all about Audrey's Little Farm. So you'll want to go back and check out that show as well too. If you didn't get to check out last week's show too, definitely go back and check out our conversation with Mike McGrath from You Bet Your Garden and Edge of Nowhere Farm. And last Sunday edition's show, we had a great, fun garden party with the folks from the Garden Party podcast. We had Texas Garden Guy, Gardening with Des, and Phil's Figs, the hosts of the Garden Party podcast, hanging out with us for a great garden roundtable conversation. It was so much fun to hang out and with those guys every chance that we get to, and I love being on their podcast. They have such a fun time on Wednesday nights. So go back, check out that show if you haven't already. Come back next Sunday to check out that Q&A with Gardner Scott. As I mentioned earlier, we did a little flip. He's usually this weekend with the Q&A. We did the book club this week. We'll definitely do the Q&A with him next week on the Sunday edition of the show, and answer all of your gardening questions again with Gardner Scott. So that'll be really fun to hang out with him. And as we had mentioned here just a little bit ago too, we are now doing the Epic Tomatoes book for our book club, and for next month in our May book selection, come and join with us May 18th with Craig LaHoyer. Epic Tomatoes, going to be a great show. Thank you all so much for being here with us for today's show. And if you can, before you head out, click that like button, hit the thumbs up, subscribe as well as the bell notification to see all of our upcoming videos and live streams. Share with all of your friends and let them know about what we've got growing on here on the Let's Get Growing show every Saturday and Sunday, 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, 2 p.m. Eastern, right here on the Urban Gardener channel. Check out all of the links down below for all of our guests and books and all of that as well. Thank you all for being here. I had so much fun hanging out with all of you. I look forward to seeing you all next week. We'll see all of you on the next show.